So whether it's effective marketing through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it might be, that's one aspect. But the other thing is really effective advertising of what your open roles are and what you're trying to do with the company. Not just, again, going back to hiring the individual, but what does my first 2 years look like? When do I get to that next stage of promotion, and how quickly can I get there? So that's a very, very important distinction when we're hiring folks in the US. For me, staying at an employer for 25 years, my whole career, just isn't the thing, right? I want to have experiences. I want to meet new people. I want to take on different duties, and I might even transition into something completely different.
We are here with Jon Davies, head of talent at Lightyear Capital, a private equity firm that specializes in providing buyout and growth capital to companies across the financial services industry. Jon has over 15 plus years of global recruitment experience, and I'm looking forward to highlighting his perspective today. Jon, thanks so much for being on with us.
Good to see you, Lisa. Thank you.
Could you just start by telling us a little bit more about Lightyear Capital, your role, and some of the experiences that led up to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lightyear, as you just mentioned, middle market private equity firm. We invest across financial services, predominantly US-based investments, but we do have some investments in the UK also. Where we really kind of operate is this kind of intersection of financial services and fintech or tech-enabled services. That's a big focus for our investment strategy. For us, I think, we look at kind of growth companies, profitable companies, ones that are able to scale in probably like a 4 or 5 year window. So, my role within that is to really, it's kind of threefold. One is to look at building out our network or our ecosystem with senior advisors and potentially operating partners. The second piece is really hiring for the board or the boards of our portfolio companies. And then coupled with that is hiring C-suite executives for our portfolio companies.
Now, Jon, you've been in the game for so long. Can you help us walk through where the major mindset shifts need to happen within companies in order to survive hiring in 2022? What are some predominant views of hiring that have been held up until now that need to change?
Yeah, I think it's really all changed with the pandemic, right? So you've got competition has always been very fierce for talent, specifically in private equity and maybe across financial services too. But I think what's happening now is you've got all these different components, like people want to work remotely or people want more flexibility around the kind of work environment. And also compensation has just become it's become very inflated, right? Because everybody's vying for competition. So people are willing to pay up and pay premiums for folks to join. So I think there's got to be some kind of, we got to come back to some conformity around, what is the industry standard? What are people doing in terms of practices around compensation? Benefits has become very important, and just the remote working environment. So I think as an employer, you've got to think about those three things more than you have done before. Um, I think where companies would probably get better though as well is really the focus on it, because things are moving so quickly and it's so competitive to hire folks. We're bringing folks into companies very quickly, right? So the interview process sometimes gets a bit skewed because you want to try and get that person on board as quickly as possible. And I think there's a real need to start kind of stepping back a bit, thinking about how important the interview process and whether you're doing the right amount of diligence to make sure that that hire is the right one. And I think that's what we'll see coming back. I also think for hiring C-suite talent or senior talent, it's not just about the hire into those companies, right? So you hire a CEO, for example, there's a big difference in skill set between being a founder-led CEO or founder CEO to somebody who's looking to scale a company. So there should be a bigger emphasis on the assessment and evaluation on like an ongoing basis of those senior talent.
And now, a lot of companies are diving deeper into getting internal referrals for candidates. What does it look like to build a robust employee referral program? How can you incentivize employees to increase the generation of referral candidates?
Yeah, it's a very very good point. So I think the incentive itself is really a very competitive kind of cash element, right? So you want to make sure that if you are incentivizing employees, it can't be a couple of $100s when you refer someone. It's got to be really competitive. If you take it in the context of what you'd pay an agency to hire somebody, or or an external recruitment firm, you're paying 20, 25, 30% of that person's first year compensation. So why not give an element of that to your employees, which is also, by the way, a good retention tool, as opposed to necessarily paying an external recruiter. Nothing wrong with using external recruiters. Obviously, they're very valuable. But I think in order to put an effective employee referral scheme together, it's got to be inclusive, i.e., you have to have everybody in the company is eligible for these referrals. I've seen in the past, and I've been part of developing employer referral schemes in the past, where because senior members of staff tend to earn more compensation, they're very often excluded from that referral scheme. And I think there's somewhat there's some support for that and some evidence to support that. But to me, bringing everybody inclusive into the employer referral scheme, incentivizing in a competitive way through compensation, and just reinforcing the importance of that referral scheme and what it means to the company is important also.
And now, so you have candidates or employees giving internal referrals. On the flip side, what are some marketing steps companies can now take to attract best in class talent, whether that's social media strategies or external competitions or campaigns? And what are some of the steps that Lightyear is taking to do this?
Yeah, so there's two things that we're looking at. One is not rebranding as Lightyear, but remarketing yourself. So part of that is because we're growing in size, our funds keep growing. But really, the other part is when you think about, if I'm interviewing at Lightyear or you were to interview at Lightyear, the first thing I look at is the website. The first thing I look at is, what's the profile of the company? What's the mission? What's the values? What are the goals? Those have become so much more important, because going back to what I said before, it's not just about the role and the duties of that role now. It's more about what's the culture, what are the values? Are they shared with my values, and so on. So Lightyear has been working very hard around this kind of re, remarketing themselves, thinking about how do we redevelop our website to really make it create connectivity with the external market, but also we are doing a lot around the importance of employee well-being and cultural change, driving values, driving goals. I think that's kind of one piece. The second piece, which we obviously can't forget about, is diversity. It's so competitive anyway, and trying to increase your diversity levels within the company, incredibly hard because everybody's going for that same talent. But we are creating a lot of outreach around, something we talked about last week was this kind of growth of a future women's leader program. So taking, female talent from colleges and helping them train and develop them through the end of the college years, transitioning into a private equity environment. So that's something that we've looked at as an initiative.
Now, you have some extensive experience in global hiring. Something I'm super curious about is, could you just unpack some of the differences between candidate expectations in Asia or maybe another country that you've worked with, and in the US? And what types
Yeah.
of maybe perks or benefits do some of these candidates want to see in one place over another?
Yeah, I think I'd say the difference between, I guess, Asia, UK, US, right? So I think the US, there is a focus on, there's a very big focus on your growth of career here, more so than I'd say London or the UK market. I think if you look at private equity, it's a very structured analyst, associate, senior associate, VP, and so on. And so I think there is a clear expectation from candidates in the US, especially in private equity, that they really want to see what their career progression looks like. And that's something that we've talked a lot about in Lightyear, really, is not just, again, going back to hiring the individual, but what does my first 2 years look like? When do I get to that next stage of promotion, and how quickly can I get there? So that's a very, very important distinction when we're hiring folks in the US. In the UK, I think it's less focused on title. It's more about, is this a company I'd like to join? How do I feel about the cultural aspects of the company? There's got to be a big personality fit. At least that's what I see with a lot of the UK candidates. I think Asia is a different market as well, right? So it depends what area of Asia. I think, from my personal experience, I did a lot of hiring in kind of Hong Kong and Singapore, which at the time was very westernized. So you kind of followed, to an extent, you followed the process of a Western recruitment process. In Japan, though, I went there with RBS, and we had zero presence in the HR recruitment market. So I had to translate the West. It was a UK bank, right? So I had to translate the website to Japanese. And one of the things that really incentivized folks was these kind of getting to know the employer. So we held a lot of events, a lot of kind of acclamation events with, here's what RBS stands for, here's what we're trying to do in the region, because especially in Asia, there's a focus on, you're less likely to move jobs regularly. It's a, career seems to be a lifetime thing, which is terrific. And so it was all about incentivizing and bringing people in that felt that they could spend the next 10, 15, 20 years at the employer.
And now, Jon, you have hired for companies that have between like 200 to 500 hires annually. What is your advice to companies struggling right now with a mass amount of open positions?
I think, utilize your resources, i.e., internal referrals, create good, solid, robust partnerships with recruitment agencies so they really understand what your business is doing. And it's not just a superficial relationship, because I think if you get that buy-in and you create this partnership, you tend to be an employer of choice for the recruitment agencies to use, but also candidates to come to. So I think that's one piece, is just utilizing all the resources you can. You mentioned about social media presence. I think that you can't underestimate that. So whether it's effective marketing through LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it might be, that's one aspect. But the other thing is really effective advertising of what your open roles are and what you're trying to do at the company. Internally, I think you've got to be very, very proactive about your hiring plans, right? So it's incredibly hard to hire people when it's reactive. So if you have 400 open roles and you haven't effectively planned, say, you're into May now, and you're thinking, well, look, we've hired like 100 people, we still have 400 to go. You should already be thinking, okay, well, what's next year going to look like? Is that going to be more people? Is it going to be a different type of hire, different levels of hire? Where do we see these kind of operational gaps within our team structures? All of that proactive planning is going to help you longer term. And I would start recruiting proactively, months ahead of where you actually need to be. So if your budget dictates that you're looking to hire maybe 200 people in Q3, Q4, go ahead and do it now, because the interview process is going to be longer, and you're probably going to lose out on candidates just because it's so
And
competitive.
that seems to be such a big conversation right now of people that are like, I just need to be reactive, fill all these positions, versus people that are now coming up with that super robust, proactive plan just to keep their bench warm, whether it's just about having those conversations, having people come use their office space, doing seminars or things to really start getting their name planted in people's heads. So I think that's great advice to be proactive about. Um,
Yeah, and I think the other thing the company should be proactive about and really think about is what's the proposition to the candidate, because we've talked about it's no longer just folks want a job, and they're willing to join a firm because of its name or its reputation. It's now a lot more to do with what's my benefit, what's the remote working, what are you going to offer me in compensation wise, and all of those elements. Now you've really got to get a solid kind of process around those, because remote working is clearly part of the proposition, and every employer is basically doing it, bar few, I guess. The benefits and the importance of benefits, we've all seen how people have suffered through the pandemic. So benefits now becomes a really, really important tool, and it's specifically for the more kind of junior staff who don't necessarily earn the kind of higher compensation. Having a solid benefits program is pretty invaluable right now.
And now, so one of the last few questions I really would love your perspective on is, a lot of people feel like the great resignation started with the pandemic. However, the trend really shows that the movement has been taking place slowly throughout the last decade. I'd love to hear what your perspective is on this. What are some things that you may have noticed during your own career that kind of started to allude to the fact that the great resignation would eventually escalate?
Yeah, where it started from, where I saw the difference was when you saw the rise of the kind of Facebooks, the Twitters, the Googles, right, and Apple and so on, all these big tech companies or fintech companies. That's where the change in kind of employee thought happened. At least that's the way I viewed it, because Facebook, I think, was one of the early. Well, actually, take a step back. When you think historically about, I'm thinking way back. I'm showing my age a bit here, right? But like 15, 20 years ago, you took a job, and one of the factors you considered was, I want to be in this job for the next kind of 10 years. I want stability on my resume. I want to grow within the company. I want to take on multiple roles within the company. And that very quickly diluted when Facebook and Twitter and all, the other companies that I'm kind of grouping together here said that, look, tenure in the role is less important, right? We want the talent. We're prepared to pay for the talent. And even if you give us 2 years or a year, we're good with that because we can continually hire people into the organization. So that was a seismic shift in how people viewed like the stability of the resume and the tenure in roles. And because that was such a big movement, it did translate to, financial services, where now I think I used to ask the question, if I saw a resume and people jumped around a bit, naturally it's a question for me to ask, right? Now it's kind of like, I don't even really want to ask it because I feel like everyone's doing it. And I think it's just become a lot more accepted because it's kind of seeped into the industry that, look, for me, staying at an employer for 25 years, my whole career, just isn't the thing, right? I want to have experiences. I want to meet new people. I want to take on different duties, and I might even transition into something completely different to what I trained in. So it's all of those elements that now I think candidates are thinking about.
And John, last question for you. At Solvable, we're all about what drives purpose and meaning for people at work. So I'd love to know what drives meaning for you at work.
Yeah, well, a couple of things, I guess. Take it from the very beginning, seeing people get the role that they want to be in, and adding value to an organization, I think is terrific. I'd also just think, it's great to see people progress. So, through my own experiences, I try to stay in touch with whoever I've worked with and whoever I've kind of partnered with in the past. And there's some good examples where, if I think one of my team has got potential, I try to kind of help them throughout their whole career. And there's nothing better than seeing somebody that came in right at the beginning and is now, a director somewhere, or just crushing it somewhere else. So that to me is just the biggest satisfaction.
John, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you all for listening to Architects of Contemporary Hiring.
Great to see you. Thanks, Lisa. Have a good day.